Hello. Um, Thinking of starting, well, not thinking, actually doing a new kind of series, right? I have a kind of eventual intention to create a sort of amateur like university or college thing where we just pick texts and study them. They can be any form of text. If on my channel, if more than one person agrees to do a kind of a study, we can do it. I was thinking starting with the Bible. I'm not a Christian. I don't believe anything. If you look through the videos on my channel, especially my videos on belief, you'll see that I don't really believe or not believe anything, but I see that beliefs are they're like toys that you can play with, so you can pretend to believe them. So I have I've read the Bible many times. So yeah, I'm not a Christian. Just put that caveat at the beginning. But I've read the Bible a lot, and I used to be a Christian. Went through various denominations, and so in the reading of it, it's not so much trying to support any specific interpretation, but rather seeing what possible interpretations we can draw out. So in my own reading and study of Scripture in the past, I have found that universal reconciliation, especially the form put forward by A. Enoch and Clyde Pilkington, made a lot of sense until I came across preterism and saw that their entire kind of interpretation of eschatology didn't fit the temporal statements in Scripture. So when I'm reading through the text, often I will interpret and bring out the kind of dispensationalist, universalist beliefs, and other times the preterist kind of interpretations. It would be fun to get other people on board who disagree with me, but what we'll do there is put a limit to it, like where we'll you can put forward your perspective and I'll put forward my perspective, and if the responses don't take into account what each other is saying, then you reach an impasse and we say, well, I hear what you're saying, I understand that, I don't believe it. I don't really care if you hear or not what I'm saying. So yeah, I'll just begin. I'll crack on. I mean, it'll also be good for communication because the reading of the text then fills in those hollow silences, so we shouldn't have any tumbleweeds. The version that I'm using, that I'm reading from, is the concordant version of the New Testament, of the Old Testament, and for the New Testament it will be the concordant version of the New Testament, both translated by A. Enoch. The reason I choose this, the reason why I eventually use that as my go-to for biblical study, is because of its translation strategy. So I'll say why I went away from the King James, because in the King James often they will use many separate English words that are often mutually exclusive in their meaning to define or translate one Greek or Hebrew word. And they'll often have many Hebrew or Greek words that are being translated as one English word. And so I think it creates a kind of mess and acts as a barrier between us understanding what the initial intent of the actual writers was. Of course, if you come in here, you can use whatever translation you wish. I think that would actually be beneficial. Then we can compare translations, because all translations are going to be kind of erroneous, aren't they? And you're going to have to kind of maybe use many perspectives in order to gain a much more truer, maybe, insight into what it's saying. So, yeah, let's begin. Oh, and so the reason why I'm using this version is because they use as few English words as possible to translate one Hebrew or Greek word, and there's never any crossover. So if the English word is used to translate one Greek word, like say pneumos or Gehenna or aeon, then it's not used to translate any other Greek or Hebrew word, and so it makes it cleaner, and you can get to what they were saying easier that way, I believe. So I shall begin. Oh, and the format I'm thinking of doing 2 chapters from the old, 2 chapters from the new. It depends on how long it takes to go through it and how much time I have or we have. So I'll start. Genesis. In a beginning. In a beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. As for the earth, it came to be a chaos and vacant, and darkness was over the surface of the abyss. And the spirit of Elohim was vibrating over the surface of the waters. And Elohim said, "Let light come to be." And light came to be. Elohim saw the light, that it was good. Then Elohim separated the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Now, I've done a Bible study with some Christians, and they build so much out of this kind of idea of God separating darkness from light. They try and say that this means that God hates evil, you know, that he abhors it. But that kind of assumes that the light and the dark were pre-existent, that God did not create them both, but rather there was this pre-existent chaos, this pre-existent mess, and God's act of creation was to separate or disentangle these two things. Yeah. Was to separate or disentangle these two things. So he's not a creator in the form of a nihilo, of an ex nihilo creator. He's not making something out of nothing there. So it's not really a truly miraculous creation, if that interpretation is correct. It's more a creation along the terms of how we as humans create. So as humans, what we do when we create something, we don't make something out of nothing. We don't have that capacity. What we do is we take what is already there and we reformat it. You know, we change it. We make it so that instead of it being like that, it's like that. And that's what we call human creation. And by using this verse here to support the idea that God doesn't like evil, that he's not responsible for evil, that he's expressing his kind of his attitude towards these two things, it makes God just like us, which is a common theme I've noticed in most Christian doctrine and dogma. Anyway, onwards. And evening came to be, and morning came to be, day one. And Elohim said, "Let an atmosphere come to be in the midst of the waters, that it may be separating waters from waters." And it came to be so. Elohim made the atmosphere and separated the waters under the atmosphere from the waters above the atmosphere. And Elohim called the atmosphere heavens. Also, again, if you want to like maintain that interpretation of the prior kind of separation of darkness and light being indicative of God's attitude towards good and evil, then you have to apply the same here. Maybe say that the atmosphere is above the waters above the atmosphere are evil and the waters below the atmosphere are evil. It is rather that what it seems to me it's saying is that God first of all creates a chaos, and then he brings order to that chaos. And what bringing order to a thing is where you separate it out into parts. And this has God being responsible for both parts of the duality. And God essentially being behind the duality, the non-duality behind it. And evening came to be, and morning came to be, the second day. And Elohim said, "Let the waters under the heavens flow together into one confluence, that the dry ground may appear." And it came to be so. And Elohim called the dry ground land, and the confluence of the waters he called seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, "Let the land become verdant with vegetation, and herbage yielding seed on the land, and the fruit tree bearing fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in it." And it came to be so. The land brought forth vegetation, herbage yielding seed according to its kind, and the fruit tree bearing fruit, whose seed is in it according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And evening came to be, and morning came to be, the third day. And Elohim said, "Let luminaries come to be in the atmosphere of the heavens to separate between the day and the night, that they may be for signs, for appointed seasons, for days and years. Let them be for luminaries in the atmosphere of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it came to be so. Elohim made two great luminaries, the greater luminary for ruling the day, and the smaller luminary for ruling the night, and also the stars. Elohim placed them in the atmosphere of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule the day and the night, and to separate between the light and the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And evening came to be, and morning came to be, the fourth day. Now, I don't think that the author of this text, whoever that is, Moses, Joshua, or whoever, meant it as literal, right? Because there's distinctions between how things are created in this and how the account in the second chapter. And also it's like the light and dark being separated before the luminaries. Where was the light from? Though that's a kind of modern understanding refuting an older understanding. Maybe what I actually think the text is doing here is it's a carryover. Moses brought this knowledge, I believe, from Egypt, and so I think it's mainly Kabbalistic in its symbology and kind of mystical in the Babylonic kind of sense. That's where it all comes through, and it all comes from originally, I believe, historically. Though my opinion about that, I wouldn't really give too much credence to, because I haven't looked much into it. I haven't read primary sources, and I haven't done the legwork to verify that opinion. So that's just an ephemeral opinion of mine, a worthless opinion. Okay. And Elohim said, "Let the waters swarm with the swarming thing, the living soul, and let the flyer fly above the earth on the face of the atmospheres of the heavens." I mean, here already we have the word soul, right? Where it says, "Let the waters swarm with the swarming thing, the living soul." This is another funny thing that you find when you study scripture, or the Bible rather, that it does not support this idea of a distinction between spirit, body, and soul. Rather, a soul is just this body, an animated body. It talks of Adam and Eve when he made their body out of dust and he breathed into it. Spirit just means breath, by the way. He breathed into it and it became animated. It became a living soul, whereas before it was just a dead soul. So soul just refers to this lump, this thing, and spirit just to a breath. So the funny thing I found in reading the text and in studying and in seeing the original Greek and Hebrew that the text comes from, that the Bible actually supports materialism. It's actually very materialistic. You could say spirit, breath is just another kind of synonym for energy. So once you impart energy towards a system, towards a dead soul, towards an inanimate lump of clay, it becomes living. You know, that's what that means. Where is it? Where was I? Oh, I've skipped a bit. And Elohim said, "Yeah, let the waters swarm with the swarming thing, the living soul, and let the flyer fly above the earth on the face of the atmosphere of the heavens." And it came to be so. Elohim created the great sea monsters and every moving living soul with which the waters swarm according to their kind, and every winged flyer according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and increase, fill the waters in the seas, and let the flyer increase on earth." And evening came to be, and morning came to be, the fifth day. And Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth the living soul, each according to its kind, domestic beast, creeper, and land animal, each according to its kind." And it came to be so. Elohim made the land animal according to its kind, the domestic beast according to its kind, and every creeper of the ground according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, "Let us make humanity in our image and according to our likeness. Let them hold sway over the fish of the sea and over the flyer of the heavens, over the domestic beast, over every land animal, and over every creeper that is creeping on the earth." So Elohim created humanity in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created it. Male and female, he created them. Here it's this is a very important verse in the Nochian kind of universal reconciliation. He grounds a lot of his doctrine on this verse, and a psalm that's also repeated in Hebrews, where it says, "Oh, what is man that thou like looks at him," kind of thing. You know, you set him above the angels and all that kind of thing. Because that verse gives God's purpose in making man, which is supposedly to have dominion over the whole thing, the whole shebang. He set man up to become the steward of the universe, you know, to become the God of the universe, essentially. And that's his intention in creating man. And you can use that as a kind of guiding rod in understanding certain understanding certain contradictions that arise within the text. So there are times when God said he doesn't lie, and then there are times where he actually does lie. You know, he gives the law and he says it's good, and in Ezekiel he says that he gave laws that were not good, and in Romans Paul talks about the law being this thing that made people sin and caused them to bear fruit unto death. You know, that the law caused all that. So why did God give this law to man that made them sin? And you can then use this idea that God's trying to raise man up to become steward of the universe to answer that question, and it's to make man stand on his own 2 feet, to make man decide for himself what to do, and then to choose the good for himself. And so the law comes in, you put yourself under the authority of the law makes you do stupid things until you no longer put yourself under the authority of the law, and you think for yourself. So it's quite beautiful in that way. And then you can go out and you can, you know, like make decisions and look at things and understand what's going on, and project forward a better plan. Whereas if you're just looking to the law to tell you what to do all the time, if you're looking to this book to tell you what to do all the time. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Chris. All right.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So you don't have to mute. You can just butt in when you want. Yes. So if you're looking to the law or this book to tell you what to do all the time, then it's a bit like playing a computer game and using a walkthrough. And if you're constantly reliant upon that walkthrough, and you want to do something that's not included within the walkthrough, then you won't know how to solve that problem. So the law had to push you away from itself in order for us to become proper and good stewards of the universe. So Elohim created humanity in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created it. Male and female, he created them. Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, "Be fruitful and increase. Fill the earth and subdue it. Hold sway over the fish of the sea and over the flyer of the heavens, over every domestic beast, over all the earth, and over every animal that is moving on the earth." I think Nock, who by Chris Vaughan gets pretty much all of his doctrine from Nock. I think Nock would say that we're nearing the period now where we've got dominion over the earth. That's what we've been doing over the last 5,000-6,000 years. And Elohim said, "Since I have given you all seed-yielding herbage that is on the face of the entire earth, and every tree on which there is the fruit of a seed-yielding tree, it shall be yours for food. And to every animal of the earth, to every flyer of the heavens, and to every creeper on the earth in which there is a living soul, I have given all green herbage for food." And it came to be so. And Elohim saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And evening came to be, and morning came to be, the 6th day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their host. On the 6th day, Elohim finished his work that he had made, and he ceased on the 7th day from all his work that he had made. And Elohim blessed the 7th day and hallowed it, for in it he ceased from all his work that Elohim had created by making it. Now, I know the dispensationalists, they use the kind of 7-day story of creation as a kind of way of kind of trying to divine what God's plan is throughout all of history. So that they're trying to say that maybe what we're going to enter into when Christ comes back is 7th day kind of rest. These are the chronological records of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that Yahweh Elohim made earth and heavens. As for any shrub of the field, it had not yet come into being on earth, nor had any herbage of the field yet been sprouting. For Yahweh Elohim had not made it rain on the earth, and there was no human to serve the ground. But mist, it ascended from the earth and irrigated the whole surface of the earth. Yahweh Elohim formed the human out of soil from the ground, and he blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living soul. I mean, that word breath, it's ruach in Hebrew, and it's the same word that's translated spirit. Yahweh Elohim, and in Greek it's pneumos, where we get pneumatic from. Yahweh Elohim planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and there he put the human whom he had formed. So Yahweh Elohim made sprout from the ground every tree desirable to the sight and good for food, with the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and also the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. See here, for the words good and evil there, I don't believe it means a moralistic good and evil. I think it just means and yum. You know, I think that's all it means. And I think when it talked about eating of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, it's when man suddenly started to separate reality between I like that and I don't like that. And then he tries to make the whole of reality conform to what he likes, which is why he tries to attribute to God only good and not evil. He's trying to make a game of winners and losers in which there's only winners, but it's impossible. He's trying to make everything in the room up. A stream was flowing forth from Eden to irrigate the garden. From there it parted and became 4 head streams. The name of the first one is Pishon. It is the one surrounding the whole land of Havilah, where the gold is. The gold of that land is very good. The pearl is there, and the onyx stone. The name of the second stream is Gihon. It is the one surrounding the whole land of Cush. The name of the third stream is Hiddegal. It is the one going east of Asher. And the fourth stream, it is the Euphrates. Now here, I think geographically that describes the Fertile Crescent. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that Moses is really just transcribing here. He's just kind of plagiarizing here knowledge he got from Egypt. There's the earliest proper kind of historian, or the earliest kind of named historian, is Herodotus, and he reports actually, no, it's Plato. Plato reports this. He reports going to Egypt and asking them about their history, and they claim that their historical accounts go back like thousands and thousands of, I mean, literally like tens of thousands of years. And so, what they could have had accounts of within their kind of temples and archives would have been accounts of the evolution of man and the rising and the evolution of civilization coming out of the Fertile Crescent, and then they could have encoded that in here in having the Garden of Eden being placed in within the Fertile Crescent. Then Yahweh Elohim took the human and settled him in the Garden of Eden to serve it and to keep it. And Yahweh Elohim instructed the human, saying, from every tree of the garden you may eat, yea, eat. But from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you must not eat from it. For on the day you eat from it, to die you shall be dying. I mean, there, I think that again, the second you give credence to this, to liking and not liking, to good and evil, you create a kind of miserable situation for yourself in which you try and guard the good against the evil. You know, you're constantly in a worried, kind of fearful state that the evil might override the good. And Yahweh Elohim said, it is not good for the human to be alone by himself. I shall make for him a helper as his complement. Yahweh Elohim had formed from the ground every animal of the field and every flower of the heavens, and he brought each one to the human to see what he would call it. And whatever the human would call it, each living soul, that was its name. So the human, I remember being told by a Christian here of how Adam must have been a very wise man to have named all the animals. I mean, it's not really hard. You just put something in front of a person. Oh, what do you want to call that? Oh, I'll call that push, okay? What do you want to call that? I'll call that Tish. Okay. What do you want to call that? I'll call that. You know, it's not hard to make up sounds when you look at objects. I mean, that's probably how language originated. So the human was calling the names of every domestic beast, of every flyer of the heavens, and of every animal of the field. Yet for the human, no helper was available as his complement. Then Yahweh Elohim caused a stupor to fall on the human. While he was sleeping, he took one of his angular organs and closed up the flesh over its place. That word is translated as angular there. In King James, it says it's a rib. But it's also used to describe that in Isaiah, when he's prophesying Cyrus taking over Babylon and going through the gates that closed off the river, that word angular is used to describe the shape of the gate, which is like a cleft pattern. It's like goes down like that, and it's got these two things there. So the ribs themselves, if you look at them, they have that kind of shape. And another organ has a similar shape. You guessed it, a vagina. So there's a Gnostic doctrine where it talks about in the beginning that God created humanity as a kind of what's the word for it? Hermaphrodite. I mean, and that also accounts for the discrepancy between between the account of creation in the first chapter, where it says, "So Elohim created humanity in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created it. Male and female, he created them." It kind of, and then here it's saying that he took him. There was a distance in time between him creating Adam and then creating Eve. I mean, and that must have been a long time, because how many animals are there, and how long would it take to name all those animals? How long has it been going on for? I don't know. Where is it? Yep, he took out one of his angular organs and closed up the flesh over its place. Yahweh Elohim built the angular organ that he had taken from the human into a woman and brought her to the human. The human said, "This time it is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This shall be called woman, for this was taken from her man. Therefore a man shall forsake his father and his mother. He will cling to his wife, and both of them will be one flesh." I mean, yeah, that's talking about the act of sex. Because if you look throughout the human organism, all of our organs function properly as they are. Our lungs function properly as they are. Our eyes function properly as they are. Our brain functions properly as it is. And there's this kind of duality within all the organs, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, other way around. And the two eyes, two nostrils, all that kind of stuff, two hearts. And it's only our reproductive organs that don't work properly on their own. And it's through the act of sex that male and female become one. Both of them were naked, the human and his wife, yet they were not ashamed. And that's where I'll leave it today. It's 2 chapters. How are you, Andrew?
I'm all right. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, the Bible, isn't it? But everything which you read there is in pre-existing text before the Bible.
Yeah, that's what I believe. I mean, Stephen says it in Acts, doesn't he? He says that Moses was very learned in Egypt.
Yeah, where did he get his knowledge from, do you reckon?
Moses got it from Egypt. And
where they got it from?
Where did they get it from? Well, I think what probably happened. One of the theories I go for would be that the kind of myths that the Egyptians had and that Moses learned and transcribed as Genesis would have just been mythological accounts of historical events. So like the Garden of Eden being placed geographically where it is, that's the Fertile Crescent. So they could have translated the historical kind of accounts of man civilizing and growing agriculture within the Fertile Crescent as this story of there being this beautiful Garden of Eden. So it's kind of like as our distance in time gets further from the event, we kind of make of it more of a fairy tale.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting, Chris. I cover it slightly different. I do slightly different. So you got the Bible being kind of like a historical book, and lots of the Christians obviously are going to go for the Bible. Most of them are, probably 100% in actual fact. But then you got older existing texts, you know, which predate the Bible, which say exactly the same thing. And if I say to if I say to a Christian, this is my theory on how we got here and who created us, then if you explain that to a Christian, you can just see a kind of a haze come over their eyes and think, you know what they're thinking? They're thinking this bloke, you know, he's a crank or something, you know. I'll go with the Bible, which is as old as what I believe.
I think they're thinking he doesn't agree with my denomination.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
He doesn't agree with the Bible. But you can show them pretty much everything they got in the Bible, including their flood, was the Bible didn't coin it first. It was done before that. It was actually in something else.
The Gilgamesh.
Yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. I'm totally for that. I think, and even the historical accounts, like in Samuel and Kings, where it talks about some of the miraculous things that happened there. I think there is a strong case to say that those miraculous events were just added in post hoc, you know, after way after those times happened. And even if they did happen at the time, like I think there's a story in Judges where the person decides who to take with him on a campaign against this enemy, based upon how they drink from a river.
Yeah.
It could have been an individual came up with that idea as a good way of vetting out the clever from the stupid, and then in order for him to enact that plan to get everybody else to follow it, he couldn't just say, "Oh, it's my idea." He had to know it came from God.
How many watches have we got?
One viewer.
That's
a few, isn't it?
That's might be Sandy, I think.
Well, he did come up and do a silly boo boo thing.
Yeah, he's coming.
If I was to do that when he's doing a video, he'd go nuts.
Yeah, probably. You put your rent up.
Oh, wow. It's pretty decent at the moment, $250 a month.
This is what happened then, okay? There was this planet which is in our solar system, which is on a massive elliptical orbit. So, you know, when you look at our solar system, you've got the sun there, and everything is on the plane. It's on a horizon. It's on one level plane, isn't it?
It's called the elliptic plane, isn't it, or something?
Yeah. You've got all the planets. They're all on the level. They're not down here, not up there. They're all like that on level, right? So there's this one planet which goes like this. We all go around the sun, nice and, you know, symmetrical, and, you know, it's all very organized. It's amazingly done. You know, I think God created that, the supreme being, but I'll get into that in a moment. So I'm going to tell you my scenario, and I want you to try and pull it apart, analyze it, and then put it apart where you think, nah, you're bullshitting me, all right?
To be fair, this is what you're talking about here is a subject area where I don't really have that much knowledge over. So my opinion.
Well, that's good then. Then you can ask questions, you see. So we have this other planet, all right? It's called the 12th planet.
Nibiru.
Yeah, okay. Which kind of goes around in a huge elliptical orbit. So it goes around like that, goes around the sun, comes back again. It goes out like that and goes around the sun and all this kind of thing. It does it about every 4,500 years. They reckon the last time it came by was when the flood happened, and that's what caused the flood. You know, its gravitational pull just ripped part of the Earth on some of the other planets as well. Apparently, there used to be another planet somewhere between, I don't know where it was actually, Mars and the next planet out. Which what would that be? Saturn?
Jupiter.
Jupiter, is it? It's
the asteroid belt in between Mars and Jupiter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Mars and Jupiter. That's right. Yeah. Apparently, there used to be another planet there, and now it's got hit, or it got torn apart by this other planet, Nibiru, And the debris you see is what was left of that planet. I think it was called Tiamat or something. That's what they called it. Apparently, that's what
the name of a Babylonian goddess as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, but that's what they called it, Tiamat or something. That's what the Anunnaki called it. So anyway, the Anunnaki, right? Apparently on this planet, which it's still out there now, and apparently it's coming back in again, or due to come back in towards our solar system. But it's way out there at the moment. But some of the astrologers understand that there is something pulling on the outward planets. Okay, there's something pulling on some of the outward planets. So something's kind of coming in.
Well, they notice perturbations in the orbits, like kind of irregularities, because it should, if it's just been affected by the sun, it should just make a smooth kind of oval kind of shape. But if there's something on the outside of it, it would cause a kind of an uneven oval that would kind of be. What's that?
You'd like the planet would wobble slightly. There'd be an irregularity there. So anyway, Nibiru is or was suffering from kind of global warming. So they needed something to save the planet. So what they wanted was some kind of material which would reflect the sunlight coming in and bounce it back out into space. So one material they could use to do that is gold. But they haven't got any gold on their planet, apparently. But planet Earth has got lots of gold, especially in South Africa and other places like that on the meridian lines. So the Anunnaki came to planet Earth to mine for gold. They found it hard work. So they created man. This is where the Bible kind of bit comes in. Because when you look at the Bible, you read the Bible, you think, right, okay, well, there's no kind of real science behind it and no mechanism. It's just like God, out the dust of the earth and breathed life into him. Well, just a bit more detail, please. That would be nice if I could understand what the mechanism was to do that. But apparently what the Anunnaki did was to take the DNA of a hominid, a primate, if you like, of the time, and then some DNA of themselves, and then they created the first Adama. The first Adam. That's what it says in the Sumerian texts. Sumerian texts predate the Bible. So the Bible's kind of stolen something there from...
They're all written on little clay tablets in cuneiform, aren't they?
Yeah, cuneiform. That's all written down for us, yeah. So they created mankind to do the hard work. Now, these Anunnaki lived to be great ages, very old. Wouldn't surprise me if even Noah and some of the other people like Methuselah, 969 Methuselah, lived to be a great age, and perhaps he was one of these Anunnaki who lived to be great ages, and they were quite tall beings as well and very intelligent. So over time, these Anunnaki spread out across parts of the earth, and that's where you get your mythologies from, like your Roman gods and your Greek gods, perhaps your Norse gods as well.
Well, I think there's all those gods, they were the same gods. It's just different civilizations and different cultures called them different names. So like in Greek, you got the head god called Zeus, and in Roman mythology, he's called Jupiter. And in Babylon and in Egyptian mythology, he's called Osiris. And it just the name changes, but the myths have a common kind of structure.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's what probably has happened there, I think. But that's taken from history, which predates the Bible.
There is this guy called Velikovsky. He wrote a book called Planets in Collision. He noticed that across the world, like you have myths in Japan and myths in South America and myths in the Middle East that talk about a time when the sun stood still, and when there was great fire coming from the sky. They have like these myths about time standing still, and you can date them to be around the same kind of period. and he believes that Venus used to be a kind of one, used to be further out in the solar system, or maybe even crossing interstellar space. And that what happened is Venus came round towards the sun, and
Right.
when it had its first pass by the Earth, it caused all the events that happened with the Exodus from Egypt. And then when it came back round, that's when Joshua talks about the day standing still. You know, he says, "Don't let the time change until I've conquered these people."
Yeah.
And he also says that, and then there's a lot of talk about the brimstone coming down, and similar events could have caused the Sodom and Gomorrah thing. And he says that if you look at the composition of Venus's atmosphere, it's got a lot of petroleum gases and petroleum chemicals. And so if you look at the areas that report having a heavy downfall of fire coming from the sky around this time, they're also where a lot of the big oil reserves are, like in Saudi Arabia and around Israel and stuff like that. And he says, like, eventually Venus just settled down to where it is now. And it made a lot of sense from what he was saying. But the problem I have with these kind of, I mean, in terms of, you can't really verify them because we don't have access to we weren't there to see it happen. So all we have is kind of hearsay to go on, which is fine. But it's
like anyone else, isn't it? It's like anyone else. You see, if my theory was the more common one, then you had a Christian come up and talk to someone about my theory, then I'll be going,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
You know, but because at the moment, who knows, in 100 or 1,000 years' time, there might be some other religion which comes up, and then Christianity might fall by the wayside. But I don't think it will. I do think that the Bible is. I'm happy to go with it, to be honest.
I think it's dying. I think the Bible was not written to or for us. By its own admission, I think
for the Jews years ago in Christ's day, to be honest, and then with the people at the time's day, David and Moses and you know, and all the rest of them. But I'm not sure whether it's for us. I think we can look at it, but you know, when God's given out the laws, the 10 Commandments and the law and all this, I don't think He's really talking to us about that.
No,
I think He's talking to the people of the day.
I mean, Paul, he talks in Corinthians, he talks about the stories of the Jews wandering through the desert, through the wilderness, as being an example meant for them then. He says it was written as an example for us, you know, which was first century Corinthian Christians. And then you got like the Christian. A lot of Christians believe Jesus is yet to come. Yet there are explicit statements which say that Jesus was going to come back within that generation's lifespan of that day. And I think the reason we can't prove what the text has to say is because we weren't there. There may have been miraculous events. Peter, I mean, the stories of Peter and just his shadow healing people and stuff like that. I don't know whether it happened or not. And I mean, I talked to this Christian, Mark Richmond Senior. I think he's on your Facebook as well.
Oh yeah.
And he will say, "Oh, it's your fault if you don't accept it. He's given you enough evidence, you know it's there." But that's a bloody book. It's hearsay. I don't have access to the experience that would verify that.
Yeah, I know.
And if God is basing my eternal kind of destination on whether or not I believe this, He seems to be pulling a bit of a con. Surely He would just come and stand there in front of me in His blazing glory and say, "Look, I'm here. Look, just believe me."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but He doesn't.
That'd be more sort of fairer, wouldn't it? Genuine in our understanding of what fair and genuine.
By the Bible's own understanding of what's fair and genuine. Yeah. You know, the Jews in the wilderness, that they were given. I mean, he talks about how the trials, the miracles that happened in Egypt, and the miracles that happened with the Hebrews, how they miraculously conquered so many enemies, were given to them as an example to the Canaanites that they were about to take over, to make them back down. And then when the Hebrews eventually entered Canaan, a lot of the people there were scared of them because of what had happened. And it had happened within their lifetime. So if God is using such high standards of proof back then, and that's only to stop the Canaanites from being killed by the Hebrews, then why doesn't He use equally high standards of proof for us today?
Well, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, he doesn't. And I mean, I mean, Jesus himself, he says that the prophets and the law, all the Torah, were up until John. That's John the Baptist, and it's like by trying to read themselves into the scripture, what they've actually done. A lot of the Christians, I mean, I think what most Christians are always trying to do is trying to make themselves God. They won't admit that they're doing that, but that's what they're trying to do by saying that God can only save us if we let Him.
You know, I think they've got this idea of what's right in their minds.
Yeah.
And if you challenge that, then they do get on their high horse and they dig their heels in, and then they defend their position. Even if you give them some kind of evidence or whatever, like, you know, they're still. I've basically given up. I gave up a couple of years ago trying to convince people, if you like, you know, and you can't convince them. It's not down to me to convince. It's all I can do is just give them, you know, a testimony, and that's all I can do, really. Reasons why I, you know, come to my understanding of it all. And I don't even find as well. I'm still gathering more and more little nuggets of information, which are, you know, kind of filling in the blanks, as it were. I've got too many more blanks to fill in until I think I've got the whole story. I kind of understand why life is shit. I was watching some videos earlier today about the siege of Stalingrad, the siege of Leningrad. Terrible, terrible stuff.
That with the Germans in World War II?
Oh,
or
terrible.
Was it Napoleon or World War I?
Just terrible. Just awful what those poor people went through. And then even then, those people, some of them might have even lost their faith and think, well, you know, if they believe in this lovely, you know, God or whatever, like, who answers all their prayers and will save us and all this kind of thing, and he goes and lets this happen, yeah, I can see lots of people turning away from their understanding, their belief in God. It's because they had the wrong understanding of what Bible and the Scripture, what life is really all about. It's not going to be a bed of roses down here. It never was going to be. It wasn't intended to be a bed of roses down here. That's the reason why God created mankind. You know, that's the reason why God created, perhaps, you know, us. I mean, I've still got a little bit of an issue with, you know, who actually were our creators. You know, was it the Anunnaki, or was it this spiritual being called God? But even then, the Anunnaki believed in a supreme being. Even they say that, apparently. But I don't think that the supreme being actually had a hand in creating us.
See, my big belief is that what you would call a supreme being is the universe, is the whole of what we would call creation. And the reason why it acts as it does is because of what it is. It is what it is. Just like, say, the reason why, say if you were to watch a cat go, say if you look at a cat through a fence and you've got a little line you're looking at the cat through, you would see the head come first, then the neck, then the body, then the tail. And if you only thought of them as separate bits, and then you thought of the head causing the neck, causing the body, you would ask the question, why does the head cause the neck and not something else? But the real reason is because the cat is one identical, one thing, and that's its structure. And so the whole universe, everything is God. And the reason why I choose what I choose is because that's the movement of God. That's what He's doing. I don't see any separation. And I think what we're like, we're a bit like in our gut, there's a load of bacteria. And they're all in competition with each other over the bits of food debris and that are coming through. And this competition on their level looks like conflict. And you can imagine one bacteria going, oh, it's fucking shit here. I wish I could just get as much as I wanted like that. What's this God being doing or something? But on the higher level, on the level of me as an organism, it's functioning. It's the way it's meant to be. And then on our level, like say that this planet, we've got loads of humans in conflict and fighting, and maybe that's just the way the universal organism functions. It just is. I would say that my beliefs, you could almost call it atheist in a sense. I don't believe there is this separate being outside of the universe that's doing it. I just believe the universe is is all that there is, and all that, and there's just stuff happening.
I think the universe is definitely material, and I think the supreme being is spiritual. So you got like when two kind of universes are colliding, but one is material, the other one's spiritual. If you can understand that.
Yeah, the problem with that is you have this. I think it's not called the two bodies problem, the mind body problem. So and this is what eventually like put the Cartesian kind of ideas in the bin, was that Descartes, he separated reality into three separate substances. He says you had mental substance, physical substance, and the God substance. And so, like, physical substance was like shape, you know, like what you call material. Mental substances are thoughts and stuff, and then the godly substance will be what you call spiritual. And he asked the question of how does something that doesn't have any extension, that isn't physical, how does it cause the physical to move? And it just can't be answered, because if one thing can affect another thing, then they have to have something in common. There has to be a shared trait. So there it appears like this material, this cardboard, looks different to this metal, that they can have an effect upon each other. Right. And that's because on a higher order of understanding, they're both made out of atoms, you know, and they're both made out of protons and neutrons and electrons. And I just don't go in for this. Like, I believe that I don't believe in materialism, and I don't believe in spiritualism either. I think there is just what I see and I'm aware of, and then these terms like spiritual and physical are fictions that we create to try and predict and manipulate what we experience. Like the spirit thing is behind a lot of magic. And magic is just techniques. It's just they believe that if I stand on one foot, turn around 5 times in a kind of pentagram, that then something will happen. I don't see the distinction between the physical and the spiritual.
But can you see a distinction between a model airplane or car and a what do they call them now? A controller.
What, the person who controls the car, like the radio controller,
the radio equipment, because you've got radio waves which are invisible, but they have an impact on a remote vehicle.
Yeah, but that's
similar. I think that's similar to what kind of like the supreme being has with us.
But
it's unseen, you can't see it, but there's still something working going on there somehow.
But I mean, those radio waves, they're caused by transformations of electrons. So you got what makes up the physical matter: electrons, neutrons, and protons. And if you do certain funny things to electrons, they turn into a couple of photons with a certain amount of energy. And when those photons then hit something else, they turn back into a certain amount of electrons.
We know that now, all right, because we built the damn thing. We know how it works. But if you showed it to a caveman 2,000 odd years ago, you showed him the car, you showed him the box, and you press this forward and it goes, he wouldn't have a clue what was going on. It's a bit like us now. We would not have a clue how God works. He could work in something which we can't detect. We don't know. The caveman would not have any idea how to detect radio waves, because he's just primitive. In the same way that we are probably primitive to the way perhaps the God and the angels and the spiritual realm works.
I think I wouldn't say primitive. I would say that back in the caveman times, they hadn't accumulated enough knowledge for more complex theories to come about.
Was that you, dear? Did you thumb me up?
No, I didn't thumb you. No.
Did you thumb me up?
I thumbed you up.
Why is that then?
You gave me measurements.
Oh, right.
All right, Sarah.
Hi.
How's it going?
All right. Right.
Oh, my dear. Yes, thank you. Can make me something nice to eat. Are you joking? I'm not hungry at all. I'm still letting my dinner go down from earlier.
Well, there is stuff.
That chocolate was nice. That chocolate cake was nice. Chocolate tart wasn't.
All dairy products, they mess me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. For me, what you could call my spiritual understanding, it's kind of ended in non-duality. I don't see any form of separation. I don't even believe that there is a person, that there is something inside me that's doing me. I think there's just actions and they happen, and then after the event happens, I create a story which says that I did that, but really all that happened was my arm moved, and there was a feeling of an impulse that was connected.
Where do you think your thoughts come from? Are you generating your own thoughts, or do you think that?
No, I think the thoughts. It's like you know, our brain's made up out of many neurons, and one neuron fires because other neurons fire, and it sends out signals to that neuron for it to fire. So on a larger scale, you're like one neuron. This is another neuron, and these are all impacting me, and that's where my thoughts come from. And so it's really one big kind of organism. The whole universe is that's related to itself through cause and effect.
So you're generating your own thoughts then, and
no, the brain is generating the thoughts.
So it's a physical thing, and it doesn't come from anywhere else. Then you're like the spirit or your soul of man or anything like that.
Well, no, I don't believe anything like that. I think thoughts are just. I think literally thoughts are just popping up out of nowhere and then going back into nowhere. That's what it looks like. If I look at it, if I watch myself and I wait until I have a thought, there's silence, silence, silence. Or I like Kentucky Fried Chicken, silence, 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 and that's what it looks like. And I can tell various stories about why that's happening what it does, but I can't verify any of those stories because I can't look under the hood. And the simplest explanation is often the best. And the simplest explanation is it's just stuff happening. There's nobody doing it. It's just stuff happening. And then we try and claim ownership over a certain section of what's happening, but it's just that's where it comes from. But really, it's just stuff happening. And what you call you is stuff happening over there, and what I call me is stuff happening over here.
Handicap. Can you see me? Can you?
I can't see you.
No, I can't. No.
What's happening there?
When you're speaking, it's just going black.
How do I get it to work then?
It's going to settings probably. Right, now I can see your avatar thing now.
How do I get it to work then? Turn the camera on.
Right, now coming through now, yeah.
Turn the camera on. Nibiru.
That's not a very good. That's not a very good camera you got there, Sam. It's a bit very blurry.
Mine's quite blurry too.
Just a cheap camera. It's cheapy.
Well, Andy.
Drop. How are you then?
Oh, it's a bit tired.
There's Christopher there.
Hi, Chris.
They're talking about.
Hi, Chris.
Talking about Elohim.
How are you then?
Tired.
It takes a little while for it to kick in.
Have you got the YouTube playing in the background, Dad?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, hang on a sec.
Hi, Chris.
I've turned it off now. That's it. Yeah, turn it off now.
You shouldn't talk about God. You killed God.
I'm not talking about God in that way, man.
Yes, you are.
No, not in the serious. You got to believe in it way. You're just playing with a belief.
This Nibiru Planet X thing, I think it's a load of nonsense.
Hang on, I'm going to go back.
Because I can see that now. I'll do it.
Sit upstairs.
Yeah, right.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Mandy.
If it's on a highly elliptical orbit and it's spending thousands and thousands of years beyond most of the influence of the sun. The sun is the life giver. The sun is the life giver. There's no heat and there's no light that great distance out there. So there's no life on this planet, if there is a planet there at all.
Apparently they've made like a bit of a dome over it, like the Earth used to have years ago.
All right, okay.
Or it could be, I mean, you can make up stories which could account for it, or could prove it. You could say that a long time ago in history, it had a closer orbit to the sun, and that's when life developed. And then some crisis occurred in orbit and made it fly further out. And the creatures on the planet were lucky enough to have developed technology that was capable enough to like harbor them during those long 1,000-year periods when they were away from the sun. You can create a story. You can create a kind of constitution of reality in which that could be true.
I don't know what to believe regarding it, to be honest. I mean, I don't know what to believe, to be truthful. I mean, it's probably not true. It's probably not true, I don't think.
No, I think it's difficult to know, Andrew, because I mean, when things become very old, then they become myths, don't they?
Yeah.
When things become myths, then it's very difficult to discern discern the actual fact from what is just made up, what mankind has made up.
Do you think that there could have been some truth in it, though, Sam? When you first, and you know, the original myth may have been based on, you know, an event or some truth.
I don't know. I mean, people. I know from my own experience how people exaggerate.
Right.
You know, and so I mean, but then if they've exaggerated something, then there had to be something to be exaggerated upon. So maybe there could be something in that myth or in other myths, ancient myths that we have in our cultures.
Yeah.
But you know, it's difficult when the sands of time move across an obscure direct vision to those myths, then you're basically a blind man, aren't you? Really stumbling forward.
I think the mystery of life. I think there has to be some kind of a reason for it. You know.
I mean, we like to feel we're important.
Well, yeah, I can't think of, you know, a kind of an evolutionary kind of a system.
Everybody feels
can account for what we are.
Everybody feels they're the center of their own universe. Everybody feels they're really important to themselves. But in actual fact, we might not be no more important than an ant.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly.
You know,
that's the way of looking at it, Sam, but I think that we are, though.
Well, I mean, I think like the reason for life, at least from our perspective, is life itself. I think you soon realise that. Say if you were put in front of a shooting range and you were about to be shot, in that moment, you wouldn't be there thinking for a reason other than life for life. You'd just be like, I want more life. Why do you want more life? I just want more life. It's the reason. You just want to live.
Well, yeah. Well, some people do.
But even the people that want to commit suicide, that are depressed, the reason why they want to get out of the game is because they're not enjoying life. What they really want, they want an enjoyable life, but they're not really prepared to put in the legwork to try and get that.
Perhaps they just ill.
Give up.
Perhaps they just had enough. Perhaps life just beat them up so much they just can't take no more. You know, that's perhaps what happens in a lot of cases. I think they're ill, and life has just fucked them up so much. Excuse my language. You know, they just think, well, you know, I can't carry on anymore. I've just had enough. And they just simply go and do themselves in, no matter what the consequences are, and whoever they hurt or leave behind, they just had enough of life. They just think, look, it's time I'm checking out now. I'm going to die anyway, so fuck it. You know, what am I now? You know, I'm 55 or I'm 68 or whatever else. You know, what have I got to look forward to? I've had a good life, you know, and just.
I think life wants to continue on. Life will always struggle. Because it's nature of life is it wants to live. It doesn't want to die. It wants to keep going on.
I think that's hardwired into us. Yeah, it's hardwired.
Also, I mean, if we were to like just forget about our own perspective on it and look at the wider thing, death is part of life. It's like life lives by consuming, and that consuming happens through death. And so that there are these two sides to things. So like with the suicide thing, like what Andrew was saying, that could be a mechanism that's in place to ensure that people die so that other people can live or other organisms can live.
No, I don't think so. I think so. I think that suicide, it's the antithesis of what life wants. I think suicide, the person contemplating it, is quite a brave person, I feel, but I also think that to follow it through, they have to be not mentally stable.
Yeah.
Well, what you're giving there is a psychological interpretation of suicide, and all psychological interpretations and ideas about mental illness, it revolves around aberration. You know, you got what's seen as socially normal, and that's defined by a group of people or by consensus, and they call any aberration around that normal, they call it illness. And it's like, well, who's to say what's normal? Who's defining that, and who has the authority? There isn't. And what you're saying there, it comes from your own preference, I think. Trying to give a kind of moral barrier to suicide. There is no barrier to anything. And I think what we're trying to erect there is this fiction to protect us from our own freedom. And that freedom includes the freedom to end it.
That's why you got freedom to do that if you want. I know for me personally, and I've been through rough times in my own life, but for me, even if I was totally paralysed, if I could look out of a window, maybe in a hospital or a hospice or anywhere, and see a cloud floating across the blue sky, that's enough reason for me to carry on living.
And I would always choose life. Now, I think I've had my time with the suicidal kind of thoughts, and I don't think I'm capable of going back there. Because now that what that pushed me into is seeing that there's a bit of me that's kind of safe from everything, that's just watching stuff. And if you just sit back and you do nothing for long enough and you just watch, after a while you find just sitting doing fuck all is bloody glorious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think being like say our culture has kind of brainwashed us into saying certain things are good and certain things are bad. So a lot of people are there saying, "Oh, I'd hate to spend all my time in a wheelchair, sat down being a vegetable," but really, that person sat down being a vegetable could be in a state of bliss. You don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to take dogs for a walk now.
I'm going to go off. I'm tired.
I'm taking. When are you taking the Bally boys for a walk in, Andrew?
Probably tomorrow morning. I just take them down the bottom of the road, so I let them have a wee down there. I'll do that before I go to bed.
Knocky knackers.
Yeah, the knocky knacker. Yeah. Probably tomorrow morning about 8:15, I expect.
Right. I'll see you later.
What have you been up to today then, Sandra?
Nothing really. Went for a nice walk with Mandy in the rain. Walked down to Asda. Had a meal at the Toby restaurant.
All right.
I've done a bit of work today. That's it, really. Getting myself ready for my operation next week.
We're doing tomorrow. Then?
Yeah, on my finger.
Is that day surgery, Sam? Will you be out in the day?
Yeah, it's general anaesthetic though, but I should be out the same day. Yeah.
General, is it? Wow.
Yeah. Cutting straight in my finger, and these fingers are going as well.
Are they?
Yeah.
So what they got to do then? Just cut your hand open and
Well, they're going to do a zigzag cut. I don't know much about it, Andrew. I'll show you it I'll show you it next week.
When are you going in then? When are you going in?
Tuesday morning.
I'll pray for you.
Right. Well, that's you. I'll see you later.
See ya. See you, Dad.
Right.
Do it again sometime.
Yeah. Well, when you're free, we could go for the next two chapters or whatever, or just have another hangout.
Really, isn't it? Just nice just to talk, really, because I'm a lazy bastard. I can't get off my arse and go and walk 300 meters down the road.
Yeah.
Easier to do that.
You can produce content on YouTube as well. Kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's well. I'll see you later, Christoph.
We'll see you, Andrew.
See you later, mate. Bye. Cheers, honey. Go on.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Let's take it off. How do I stop broadcast?